SIA, winners and losers, a vulnerability analysis of sharks, rays, and chimeras in the Gulf of California, Mexico.
Thanks everyone for being here this time. This is a small part of my PhD project, and many people are helping me and collaborating in this process. Time ago, 2 papers were published, and the authors established that Mexico is not one of the most vulnerable countries in terms of fishing, but is this panorama like that, considering that the Mexican fisheries are very complex? So that's why we decided to develop an analysis, including 2 main components. The components of fishing and the component of climate change, represented by productivity and susceptibility of the species, and also for 3 components for climate change, which are exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity of these animals. So this analysis was applied for the full Mexican Pacific, but I'm going to show you the results only for the Gulf of California. When you look at the Gulf of California, you can think about an example of complexity. Why? Because this water body has, for example, depth, different levels. Depth is increasing from north to south. If you look at the inside of the Gulf, the western side, for instance, you can find rocky substrates, but when you look at the eastern side, you can find sandy substrates. And then we can figure out different types of habitats we can find there. Also, another important characteristic is its water masses. We have several water masses there, meeting together at the entrance and flowing towards the north. And also we have 2 important currents. One is the California current, and another the Mexican coastal current. Also, we can find upwelling and primary productivity areas very well established there. So this is just part of the picture when we talk about the Gulf of California. But when we talk about fisheries in the Gulf of California, this is another story. Why? Because we have different types of fisheries, different fishing devices as well. If we talk in terms of fishers, we can find different social status, different minds. And all of these characteristics make a little bit difficult to evaluate the Mexican fisheries. When we realized all of these factors, then we decided to set up some steps for assessing risk. For example, one step was to specify the scale. In this case, we did it for fishing stressors, and we did it for climate change stressors as well. Then we had to specify the geographic range. As I said at the beginning, we did it for the full Mexican Pacific, but for this presentation, I'm going to talk about the Gulf of California, which is highlighted red. To understand the future in terms of climate change conditions, we need to look at the past. So we decided to describe the Gulf of California's oceanographic conditions, which include sea surface temperature, sea level pressure, sea level rise, chlorophyll A concentrations, and so on. We also use representative concentration pathways to create high emissions, medium and low emissions scenarios based on greenhouses. When we identify, observe, and projected oceanographic and ecological conditions, we decided to use an approach developed by Andrew Chin in Australia for chondrichthyans from the Great Barrier Reef, and this approach is called ecological groups. Also, this approach was used by Terry Walker for the Southern Australia chondrichthyans, and this is the first time we did it for the Mexican chondrichthyans. Ecological groups can be based on different factors, but habitat use, depth strata, habitat dependence, and lifestyles are the main ones I suggest you. Then, again, when you look at the full Mexican Pacific and specifically the Gulf of California, you can realize what is going on with sea surface temperature. So on your left, you have a map showing sea surface temperature from 1956 to 2005. And you can see two main gradients. You can see cool water and you can see warm water. Cool coming from the north, brought by the California current, and warmer water coming from the south, brought by the Mexican coastal current. And then we decided to identify and arrange all the species with more than 10% of their distribution in the study area to look at for distributional flexibility of this chondrichthyan fauna. We have two visitors in the Gulf of California. One is El Niño and the second is El Blob. Both phenomena associated with warm ocean water. The El Blob is a warm water mass coming from the north of Alaska, and both increasing sea surface temperature. So when you look at the mean sea surface temperature from 1960, you can see that it was about 26. But when you look at around 2013, 14, you can see that when El Niño and El Blob meet together, the sea surface temperature increases. And then after these phenomena occur, you can see that sea surface temperature is still higher than the mean. This is just an example of the high emission scenarios for some variables. You can see that by 2050 and by 2099, we have changes. We have projected changes. And some of these are increasing, at least for sea surface temperature and salinity. I have used this data and previous publications for other fisheries in the Gulf and identify 53 species of sharks, 48 species of rays, and 4 species of chimeras. The majority of these chondrichthyans are distributed at 75 meters depth, where the main variations in sea surface temperature occur in the Gulf of California, and where the most important fisheries are operating there. This slide is, I want to point out that the majority of the species are commercial sharks, have optimal water temperature range called cooler water in the north. So what if this cooler water is changing and shifting to warmer water? Regarding ecological groups, the majority of the species are allocated in the ecological group called shell sand, less than 75 meters depth, again, where the main variations of sea surface temperature are occurring and the main fisheries are operating. And we have, I have some example of the species allocated in these ecological groups. This is the exposure of each ecological group to stresses from 3 climate change scenarios. So possible losers, species allocated in inshore waters, reef and sand, but less than 75 5 meters depth. Possible winners, deep species, the bathyal ones. When you look at the exposure risks in terms of fishing stressors, then you can see highlighted red possible losers again. Species in inshore waters and species in sand substrates, less than 75 meters depth, depending on the fishing stressors you are looking at. But when you look at all the fishing stressors combined, then the story is different. And also you can see again possible winners. I would like to give a special thanks to the EEA board and the Seas Foundation for the travel grant, and also to the University of Melbourne, the University of Veracruz in Mexico, the National Council of Science for giving me the scholarship, and the Fisheries Institute of Mexico for supporting me during the process of getting the data, both in the field work and on the analysis. Fishers are an important part of this story as well. Thank you.
Very much. Any questions? One question for me. Did you already observe any effects from climate changing on the sharks?
I what, sorry?
Did you already observe any changing because of the climate change?
We have observed that some species are moving, retreating from the Mexican waters. Of course, we need more information, but at least I can tell you that sea surface temperature is increasing. This is a very important variable for chondrichthyans, not only in Mexico, but I think around the world.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions,